And I appreciate you helping me with the DNA thing, because that I look at the same thing. Like when it was first mentioned going to a seance, I had a UFO sighting, and I always, when people want to go for look for stuff in the sky, I go, nah, I've seen that before. I'm really not interested in the show anymore.
I'm still waiting for my first one.
I'm trying to figure out like what is this about? Like what and that's when I saw the physical mediumship. I thought this is the most sort of evidential type of thing. If you can prove this is actually really what's happening, it sort of answers all the questions. And so I really appreciate that you've come in. Sinead, have you got any comments you want to make? Because I think it's a little more new to Sinead than me. And I want to sort of get into a little bit about you bringing in David Thompson and what he's all about, because I think you have to define for the audience, for me, is what I was having a problem with is I was trying to find, because I was doing the DNA test, I was trying to find either a trance channeler or a trance medium, and I just couldn't. I mean, I'd have people who claimed they were, but didn't want to give their sample because they figured the pharmaceutical industry was going to get their DNA and stuff like this. I was having a very hard time trying to find. It wasn't that it wasn't going to work. I just couldn't find anybody. So you came along and really solved the problem, and I really appreciate.
No, it's difficult. You know, gosh, 13 years. I have, and I didn't say this earlier, I probably should have, I probably have sat in over 300 seances in 30 years, and these are legitimate seances. Wow. These are darkroom experiences, or maybe they have some form of light in a mild way, maybe a moderate way, but not like bright light like we have right here. And I say that in the work that the research in precipitation mediumship, I can be and see phenomena take place in a space like this with different kinds of light, red light. I can see the phenomena, or the phenomena can happen in this setting, but there's still a barrier to the phenomena. There's a container or something that holds the darkness. But I have sat in so many experiences, and even in those experiences, a small percentage I don't believe were legitimate. I discovered some very inappropriate things. And even the people who come forward to tell me that they're psychic surgeons, trance channels, physical mediums, whatnot, you know, not all of them are what they say they are, and that's the hardest part. You literally have to repeatedly be willing to sacrifice yourself, to put yourself back into those encounters to determine, is this person telling me the truth? Is the phenomena evidential? Is it repetitive? Is there some sort of a sign from spirit? Am I getting what I'm asking spirit to give me? Is it being shown in these experiences? And really, it's interesting. I go back to biblical scripture when someone questioned Jesus about negative spirits, and Jesus basically was talking about, by their fruits shall they be known. Well, you've got to put yourself back into these experiences. You can't, scientifically it's inappropriate, and I think professionally it's inappropriate to label somebody a fraud the very first time you see it. You've got to put yourself back in a few more times to really solidify your understanding. What the heck is going on? Is it just an inappropriate action that was taken that caused me to think they were being inappropriate, fraudulent, or is there really manipulation taking place? And you know, I've come across a lot of people who say they can do what they can do and they don't. But you know, it's really interesting because this world, there's been a long history of inappropriateness, and the darkness really allows inappropriate action to take place. So you've got to go in with a scientific mind, and we deserve it. I mean, I didn't give 13 years of my life to have this proved it's all fake. I know it's not, and no one can ever take it away because I've witnessed too much. And probably you, Sinead, and you, Grant, you've witnessed things that I have no concept of a world or a reality of non-human beings, for lack of a better terminology, extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional. You probably have witnessed and experienced things that I can't even wrap my head around yet. And that's because you're meant to be a part of that. And you can assess and determine what is legitimate in your world that I couldn't even begin to. Just like people coming to my experience, I've even had people entering seances that left thinking they were fraudulent when I knew good and well they were not. But based on their limited level of understanding, they literally thought it was not possible what they witnessed. So they immediately labeled it fraudulent, and then of course the barking began.
Yeah.
So
that's where the DNA comes in, where you can actually have a test where, like I think I mentioned to you the fMRI, where they're doing the mediums at it used to be a University of Pennsylvania, and people who pray and stuff, where they're looking at the brain patterns.
Fascinating.
You can get a thing that's on paper that actually proves, okay, if you say you can do this, you will produce this brain pattern, or your DNA will change or whatever. And it will vindicate the consciousness once and for all. And then, as I say to people, like, you may think it's all a material world, but you should know how to swim, because I think you've fallen out of the boat. Everybody's going to suddenly realize they're in the water. And this is actually for real. And then everything changes. Once it's almost like there was a New York Times article that said the government was investigating UFOs. And it's sort of like the whole parameter changed. And this would be the same thing, where suddenly people realize it's for real. And then everybody starts thinking about it. Sinead, have you got anything you want to ask?
Oh my God, it's just a million things, a million. Kevin, I really, really relate to so many things you said. And I don't know where to start, but I think just, coming off the top of my head, first of all, you obviously have the gift of mediumship, but not only that, I think equally important is your ability to communicate what it is that you were experiencing. Because, I think of professors I had in university, incredibly learned people, incredibly brilliant, learned, fascinating people with wonderful thoughts and ideas, but could not communicate what they knew, and if you can't communicate what you know, it can only go so far. It's very limited. So I'm very appreciative of that. I'm also extremely appreciating your ethics, and you use the word aggression and how you think that's a good thing. I could not agree more. I think it's incredibly important to uphold, the legitimacy and the authenticity, the honesty, the honesty of the experience, because that is the truth of it. And to uphold that is incredibly important, especially because many of us who are tuned into this stuff understand that we're on a global level, people want more. Like we're rising to another level of understanding and thinking about this. And so in support of that, we really do need to be for real. We need to be taking it seriously. We need to be having a skeptical mind, having a scientific mind, asking questions, checking in repeatedly. Like I really, really relate to you saying that. And also your experience of, all of a sudden, I can't relate at all to growing up in Texas and, a white conservative Southern Baptist background.
It was interesting.
I'm Canadian. I've grown up in the most multicultural city in the world. My parents grew up Irish Catholics, left the church when they were in their 20s because they kept questioning the church. Why? Why does God do this? Why does that? Why does God say that? And the only answer they ever really got was, it's just because God says so. It just is, right? So there was no questioning. There was no discussion.
No.
So they left the church. They raised my brother and I to be ethical people, to be good people, but with no religion whatsoever. And so that gave me the freedom to, I think, tune into, or to do my best anyway, to tune into. I've had the lifelong experience of being connected, but when you're a child, you're so receptive to it, but you don't understand it, and then you're a teenager and you start getting into all the social pressures and the conditioning, and then you're an adult and you're fully into the conditioning, right? So it's really hard to maintain this feeling of connection, and it's really hard to receive your messages and receive your communication from them and understand it and own it and be like, this is real, okay, and follow it and use it in your life when everything around you and your environment tells you you're ridiculous, you're oversensitive, it's not real, all this stuff. So when you said about having this experience of traveling and I think you were in your car and you felt this overwhelming presence come to you and say, drive south, nope, turn back, go there, you got to do this. I really identify with that because that's basically what happened to me this past summer at the end of June. I had no choice. Like they just shoved me towards all of this and said, you have to do this. You have to pay attention to this world. This is a big part of who you are. This is a part of your life. This is your purpose. You cannot ever ignore this again. Like they were very, very firm, very serious.
And did you know where that train of thought was coming from? Did you know what beings or?
No, I've never seen them. I've had limited visuals of UFOs, very limited contact in terms of the visual. It's been a great deal of them literally making things happen in my life. Like or I ask for something and they will respond immediately, and I'm being guided, I'm being led, I'm getting communication and messages all the time. You know, I was led to Grant, which was just not an accident whatsoever. There's other things that are coming from that, and Grant and I are just having ridiculous numbers of synchronicities that are occurring independent of each other. Like he will have something happen and I will have something happen. It's the same thing, and we don't know that the other person is experiencing it. And then we say, hey, I had this funny thing happen, and we realize it was the same thing at the same time. You know,
and when you talked about that you were you mentioned being extraterrestrials or UFOs, I forgot what you said about the information. Were you aware that the beings were non-human, or that there was and so were you, in your mindset, was it more, and pardon me for not using proper terminology because your world's a little new to me, so bear with me, but I'm going to say extraterrestrial consciousness. And were you aware that that is what was communicating with you, or was there any concept of a spirit world?
Well, this thing is, I still don't really know. I don't feel like it's one type of being. You know, I feel like whether we call them spirit guides or extraterrestrials or whatever, I feel it's all the same thing. It's a consciousness. It's just consciousness. And it's a consciousness that sees us in a way that we cannot perceive ourselves within this third, you called it the third dimension, the third plane. We're very, very bound to physicality. We're very bound to materialism. We are attached to this idea that everything we see around us is real. And the fact is it's not, it's an illusion, right? So this is a consciousness that I don't actually care to call it anything. I call it my spirit guides because I don't know what else to call them. I don't know. I know there's more than one. I know that the only time I've seen them, and I'm not even sure this was all of them. I think it might just be one group, because I feel like there's many around me. I feel supported, and I don't think it matters. You know, I don't think it matters what they look like or what kind of bodies they have or where they're from. I mean, the whole point is, the message is, raise vibration, spread love, become aware, you know, inspire people, and care about our planet, and, you know, elevate yourself, elevate other people, encourage other people to elevate themselves. I mean, that is the point. That's the whole key. So when I had my one experience of being inside a UFO and then quickly outside of it, that had never happened to me before. I didn't know. I did not ask for that to happen. I did not have any. I mean, I've always loved the idea of space, and I've always felt like it's impossible that in this gigantic, expansive universe, we're the only conscious beings on one planet. That's impossible, right? But I never had a thing about UFOs. I never had a thing about ETs. I was not following it. It was not a part of my life at all. And then all of a sudden, boom, I was in a UFO, and then I was outside of it and saw these light beings in front of it, giving me an incredibly enthusiastic, joyful welcome, and really wanting me to come with them and wanting communication. So that's the only kind of visually specific experience I've had. But the thing is, there's a particular feeling that I get when they're talking to me. It's a very particular feeling, and it comes with a physical experience. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's a frequency.
I've had that my whole life since I was a little child.
It's almost like people who experience seizures or epilepsy, and they say, I can feel the aura coming upon me, my energy shifting, and they can feel a wave of something coming, and then they shift. And then they have to go through it. It's interesting, and I won't take too much on this, but I'll say this. I have been aware of spirit speaking in seances. They have told us, myself and others, through different mediums, but they're all saying the same thing. We come to you in the form, wearing the costume or the mask that you can receive, because if you don't like Native American Indians, we will not present to you a Native American Indian, because we need your mind in the most receptive state in order to bring forward the information. So it's fascinating. The perfect example, Maurice Barbanel, a very famous medium, who was also the editor of the Psychic News in the United Kingdom for many years, he and his wife, and he began to channel Silver Birch, and later in Silver Birch identified as a Native American Indian for many years, but would drop little hints that he was not Native American. And so it came out later that this consciousness speaking through Maurice Barbanel, who called himself Silverbirch, was actually a Jewish scholar in the spirit world, and Maurice Barbanel did not like Jews, and so would never have allowed a Jewish spirit to speak through him. He was anti-Semitic. Interesting point. I've also heard on television through some of the UFO programming, and they make reference to, isn't it interesting that Einstein and Nikola Tesla and all these other greats, even some of the musical greats, Mozart and whatnot, they would make reference to a consciousness that would speak to them from the heavens or from the higher realities of existence. Even though they didn't have the words for it, they knew it was coming from a higher vibration. They knew that they could communicate with it, and it would either send them images, thoughts, or they could hear words, or could hear whatever they were working on, music especially, and they would receive information. They would be guided from a higher consciousness. That makes me actually think from those shows that they were more extraterrestrial, a form of dimensional consciousness, not necessarily spirit guides, but spirit guides, I think, are one type of consciousness. They're more soul oriented. They're more interested in, they tend to be more interested in our spiritual and philosophical evolution. But in another breath, I will tell you, a woman came to my church less than a year ago, and I had heard this through the grapevine, but I didn't give it much thought. I had heard that extraterrestrial consciousness was influencing, was acting as spirit guides and was influencing seances. And I thought it was a little bogus. It seemed like a far stretch for me until this woman came to my church. And she was an older lady. She had been in California. She didn't remember where, unfortunately, so I couldn't track down this medium. But she went to an evening of trance channeling. The lights went out. I think there was a dim candle in the room, and the woman began to channel beautiful healing information. This lady who was shaking, she didn't even want to tell me the experience. She was so hesitant. You could tell she was very, very stressed about telling me. And she said she saw a black figure, kind of a humanoid figure behind the woman that was in trance that was speaking. And she knew she couldn't leave because of the instructions. You can't leave a seance once it starts. So she was terrified the whole time, thinking the woman was working with demonic or evil spirits. She left the experience, and her friend who took her drug her back another time. The woman didn't say no, but she was terrified going in. And this time, as she watched in fear this woman go into an altered state, the black form began to appear behind the entranced medium, and she stared at it, constantly staring at it. And suddenly, she said it was though a being phased into the third dimension. She said, I instantly saw a solid form, and she said it was a reptilian being, and the head turned and looked at her, and red eyes shone, and instantly disappeared. And she said she was petrified because she had only heard bad things about those beings. And I said, wait a minute, didn't you say that the medium who was sharing this channeled material was giving healing information? I said, was it uplifting and beautiful and positive and very spiritual? And she said, oh, I think it was. I guess it was. She said it wasn't negative talk. It wasn't inappropriate talk. She said, actually, it was a beautiful healing experience. And I remember the words were healing to the recipients. And I said, that fascinates me more than anything, because it goes against what little I have knowledge on of the reptilian race. I was told they're very egotistical, they're very maniacal, very, very driven to dominate whatever they do, and especially the human race, to take advantage of us and manipulate us. This being that was reptilian was working in a very cooperative, supportive, and in a very uplifting spiritual way to help this room full of people. This old lady that had come to me could clearly somehow access the energy field and somehow either break it down, because I do believe that they use some form of a camouflage, I don't know if it's technology or an energy that they're able to express that hides their form. But this woman was able to access it and shift it so she instantly could see the being, and then the being left. And I said, when the being disappeared, what happened to the medium? And she said, well, the medium woke up and she was really confused and she was disturbed because she thought somebody had pulled her out of the somebody touched her or something had happened that pulled her out of the trance. And I said, well, what happened was you saw the being that was controlling the medium. That is a fascinating story, and it tells me that there are non-human beings supporting the human race
Oh,
in a positive way. And you clearly have had that experience.
Yes.
in a unique way. And I think this woman that I mentioned had that experience. And it wouldn't surprise me that I believe there are extraterrestrial conscious forms and even physical forms that can telepathically influence and work with humanity, because I know of another woman in Sedona that I can't remember her name, but in my notes I remember watching a video where she would communicate with these lights that they would track through night vision technology with her little tours, and the ships would stop as points of light. They would speak to it, and it instantly would reflect light back. It would beam or brighten up, and then instantly it would take off or disappear, totally phase out. And so that woman is communicating with these beings somehow telepathically because they instantly responded.
Yeah.
So there must be different forms of communication taking place.
Well, I think that it's too limiting to keep it within the human sphere. It's just simply too limiting. And I'm including people who have died and are delivering messages back to the living through mediums. I'm including that when I say that, because it's simply too limiting. This is one planet. There are trillions and trillions. Yes. We know this scientifically. We know this. There are trillions and trillions of galaxies. How is it possible that in this massive, ever-expanding universe that we are the only consciousness? It just makes no sense. And so I think, if we think like that, it is simply too limiting in terms of our evolution as human beings and our the evolution of our consciousness. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And in regard to what you were saying, with the reptilian appearing and the woman being afraid, and then you asking her, well, what was the message that was coming through? Wasn't it beautiful? Wasn't it healing? And wasn't it kind? She said, well, yes, it was. It's just more evidence of the fact that, we are so attached, first of all, to thinking fearfully.
Right.
But we are so attached to the bodies of things. This is why racism exists, right? This is why stigma against people with physical disabilities exists.
Right.
This is a huge source of ridiculous barriers and divisions that we create between each other because of the optics of another being, right? Rather than looking past the physicality and seeing the actual being that is there. Right. And that's really all that matters, is what is coming from that being, what that person, that animal, that extraterrestrial, that spirit, whatever, what is coming from them? Like, what is it that you feel? Look past what the physicality, because the physicality really doesn't matter. And this is something that Grant and I have talked a great deal about, is that, people get extremely hung up on UFOs and extraterrestrials, what the bodies looked like, what were the eyes like, what was the shape of the ship. Right. Who cares? Yes, it's interesting. Really, it's interesting. It's fun. It's fascinating. But ultimately, that's not the point. The point is they're here to help us. And we know that because clearly their technology is superior, and they could have done anything they wanted to do to us now if they really had the intention to harm us. That could have been done eons ago.
True.
Here to help, right? So why are, who cares what it looks like? We should be receiving the message, and the message is the same in all religions, like you said, in all the, all of the prophets, all of the wise people who have been trying to teach us for generations and generations, for thousands and thousands of years. The message is love. It is kindness. It's compassion. It's elevating your thinking. It's raising your vibration. It's paying attention to the planet and loving this incredible planet that we live on, and having gratitude for it. And, I relate very much to what you said about gratitude. If you are grateful for even the smallest things, finding a parking space, eating a really delicious sandwich, who cares? It's all gratitude. It doesn't matter what it's for. And the practice of that does create incredible abundance. So I can relate to you as well. Yeah.
Thank you. It makes sense.
I can add a little bit here. I'm writing a book. Sinead knows about this, and it's called Extraterrestrial or Maybe Not. I used to be in the extraterrestrial camp, and as Sinead pointed out, we go to people and we say, did they probe you? Did it hurt? Were you scared? I go to them and I say, did you ask if it was an alien? And a lot of people have, and you know what the answer is?
What?
No, not really. And
Interesting.
And it's the whole idea, like they don't have sex. Like I'll say, do they have clothes on? And the person will say, no. Do they have sex organs? No. Do they have a belly button? No. Do they have nipples? No. And they don't have ears? No. And it's like, well, something's wrong here. It's like,
Huh.
like a red flag. And people will say, I've got numerous experiencers who have had the experience who will say they talked to the being and the being said exactly what you said. Whatever you believe. In fact, an A-lister Hollywood, mother, super famous in Hollywood, told me that the being told him, when we come to you, we go into your head and we can only use what's in your head. So if you're in a state of fear, we will use fear to teach you a lesson. And if you are in love, we'll use love. And it's the same. So I say it's all the same thing. Even my father, who the day before he died, had his father come to him. And he didn't tell me because he knew I was probably going to say, I told you so. And because we used to sort of argue about it. And he told my mother, and my mother said, well, what did your father say? He was just here. That's all you need to know. And so it's this idea that why would he not come if reincarnation is a fact? Why would he not come as somebody in the 15th century? Because my father wouldn't know who he was. So all these things they can manifest as whatever they want, which is why I'm so interested in this manifestation thing. They're coming across. So they come as an alien, they come as a dead person, they come as whatever. And it's all the same thing. They're coming out of wherever they're coming from. And it's all a positive thing. We're in the Christian religion. We want to say, Kevin's a good guy or Kevin's a bad guy. And we say, you're going to heaven, you're going to hell. And we stick with that thing. And instead of realizing all of sin and fallen short of the glory of God, let he who is perfect cast the first stone. They were all just souls trying to figure out what's going on. We're trying to learn, and we're getting help from the other side and trying to elevate us.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I agree with you about, there being a point to, I think that there's benefit even in the scariness, right? Like if we see something scary, there's still benefit there, because if we make it to, if I say it in a more relatable way, we all have challenges. We've all had really difficult experiences in our lives when we've suffered, when we've had a terrible time, we've gone through grief, we've gone through loss, whatever it is. There's always something valuable that you can learn from that. There's always a way that you can see it. You can change your perception of it, not see it as a 100% terrible thing, and learn something from it that makes you better, that makes you wiser, that makes you stronger, that makes you more aware, right? And so to me, the same philosophy applies to when you see something scary. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's not also good for you. I think confronting fear, if you're confronted with a scary physical being, like a reptilian or something like that, if you confront that, there's always benefit to confronting fear, right? There's always benefit to facing what it is that we're afraid of, embracing it, allowing it to come into being part of our experience. Because when we do that, we realize it really is nothing. It is actually all the same as all the positive stuff. I'm not saying that incredibly clearly, but I think you know what I mean.
I do. Yeah.
Can we go to David Thompson? Because Walter sent me a tape of William, I guess, is the control for David Thompson.
Right.
And they asked the ET question. And he said, no, we've really not run into anybody up here that's ET. And it seems to back the same sort of thing where almost like Jacques Ballet, who started, said, I'd be very surprised if this turns out to be ET. It seems to be something more than ET. So David Thompson, because you're bringing him into your facility in October. Can you talk a little bit about him and what's so spectacular? Because I wrote a book on music, so I'm very interested in his bringing music, because there is the connection about music. The number of musicians who have had UFO experiences or paranormal experiences, and they're tapped into something as well. So David Thompson has this musical angle to him. Maybe describe what's going to happen in October, and maybe how many of these events do you have a year?
Okay. Well, I'll tell you, David Thompson will be going to a sister church. It's in Sarasota, called the Sarasota Center of Light. Okay. And that is formerly run by Reverend Tom Newman. And David is brought by Tom Newman to that location. My church is not a part of it. I just help promote locally to bring to let my network of people know, hey, this great world-class medium is going to be in the state of Florida. You might want to go experience it. So a bunch of us from my church will actually carpool over to go. And I've probably sat with David over, I would think, close to about 30 times now over the years. And they were all at, is that true? Yeah, all at Sarasota Center of Light. And really, William is one of the main controls and a beautiful communicator. And the experiences are really profound. There's a lot of phenomena. We have full materialization that happens. There is occasionally luminosity that happens in the room, luminous phenomena. The materialized forms will pick up musical instruments and play them, perform on them. And there are also loved ones or beings that will materialize in various forms, and maybe a voice box will form inside a trumpet, or maybe the upper torso will form so they can communicate with their loved one in the room. And so you have a lot of sitters receiving messages. I say a lot. A few of the sitters are receiving messages from loved ones who have departed, and the evidence that comes through is really amazing. People being called by their nicknames, and there's two-way communication taking place in real time. Really beautiful experience. David is even the clothes that David is wearing are dematerialized and turned inside out and backwards on him, rematerialized on his body. He's fully restrained at all times. Time is given for the attendees to get to check all of this stuff at different points in the experience. Truly a beautiful experience. And I've had incredibly profound experiences where a representative for a couple of women, actually the Bangs sisters, which were two very famous precipitation mediums from the 1800s and 1900s, they could not materialize. However, they sent Admiral Osborne Moore, who was a spiritualist reformer in the U.S. in the British Navy many years ago. He had died, but he was supportive for them. He came through and spoke to me to bring through truly a beautiful message of support and guidance and encouragement in my own precipitation development. And curious things like that have happened. And the attendees will all go through a process of being questioned, most likely by Tom Newman, who stands in the place for that church just as I do, someone who interviews the guest. They will all receive an hour to 2 hours of instructions before they go into the dark room experience, the seance. And then they will be searched, frisked and searched with metal detectors and electronic devices, and then everybody will be positioned. And you won't be positioned next to the person you came with, which also helps to reduce any inappropriateness, because and most of the time people are holding hands to identify that they are where they need to be doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so really, that's what I can tell you about those experiences. I think we're going to have a great time when we go back and sit with David. David is a profound physical medium and just an amazing medium in general. I'm very proud of him and his work. At my church, we put on, let me think, it's over 140 events per year. Not all of those are mediumship oriented. Those can be church services, healing services, mediumship demonstrations, classes, lectures, workshops. And I would say probably, gosh, I don't even know, and I should know, but I would say physical mediums, maybe we bring about 2 to 4 per year. And those, they typically come in the spring and the fall when we have the busiest season. It's the most profitable for us because we got to pay the bills. We live in the third dimension, and I have to do it. If I host mediums in the summer, it's very difficult to get a large attendance. But that's just the way my area works. But I would say probably 2 to 4 physical mediums, and then we have a cadre of maybe 10 to 12 other mediums. We generally have one big medium per month that will come in to demonstrate, and the rest of the month is more of my locals and my friends who are visiting, who are great teachers and speakers or things like that. And so we'll have different events throughout the month. So that's kind of how we operate.
Just a question about David Thompson. And let me give you a thing that shows you the parallels across this. You mentioned David Thompson, they'll take his clothes or whatever,
yes,
turn him backwards, inside out. Same thing happens with the abductees. I have a guy local in here. It's very common. And it's the question is, well, why are the aliens doing this? Are they that stupid they can't get the person's clothes on right? And it's like, no, I call it the theory of wow. They want you to go, wow, what happened there? Like, and it makes you think. It's like, oh, it's not a physical world like I thought it was. So it's exactly the same phenomenon. And I'll send you the case of this guy in Winnipeg. Had woke up with his shirt inside out and backwards and couldn't figure out what was going on. And the other thing, so Louis Armstrong is apparently shows up big
Yes.
time, and who else? Lennon showing up.
Louis, the few that I can remember were Gandhi made a brief appearance one time. That was very beautiful. I love studying yoga, so I knew who he was and what he stood for. And Louis Armstrong, William. There are a few other characters. I can't remember at the spur of the moment the names of his several of his guides, and even the famous people I don't remember because I deal with so many mediums. I can't remember all the individuals that come through, but they've been very, very much documented in his journey. And I'm sure if we Googled it, we would know exactly who the names were. But they tend to make, if they're famous or people of history, they'll make a brief appearance. They usually come to discuss something of philosophy. There's a reason why they're there, and they state it has something to do with the cooperative energies of the attendees. The specific types of attendees have shown up and created a vibration which drew in this individual from history that could speak on this matter that the group as a whole would benefit from. But if it was just, say, Sinead, you came and you were a specific frequency and the spirit thought, well, I'll just come in to talk to Sinead. Well, that doesn't help the other 20, 30, 40 people. In fact, it wastes precious energy. So, and spirit is very particular in trying not to waste energy because it takes a massive amount of etheric and spiritual and even earth powers to create certain types of phenomena, even minute phenomena. So they're not going to waste it typically on coming through for you, Sinead, as an individual. They tend to come as a collective for the group to bring a group message. Now, I say that there was one seance that with David, when Admiral Usmore Moore broke protocol and materialized and spoke to me. And it was very unusual and at first not really appreciated by the circle leaders, but he got his message across and then departed. But it did use up some of the energy, but they needed to get a message through to me to really just back up my spirit, because I was a bit deflated when that happened. And I think they were worried I would stop following the path they had put me on. So they came back in and dangled another carrot and presented this information and built up my I can do it attitude. And then I left there beaming and then jumped right back in 100%. So they'll make whatever the word is, exemptions, they'll make exclusions, and they will do what they need to do for purposes and greater good. But
it makes a lot of sense, because when it happens in a group situation, then everyone, it's a collective experience and everyone
Yes.
validates each other, and no one's walking out. If it was a one-on-one thing and no one
Right.
had ever had that experience before, they might walk out of there thinking, I'm just crazy. I might be going crazy. But when you have, I don't know how many people you have in a room during a seance, but if it's something like 8 people, 10 people, that all of those people then have a bond over that experience and connect over that experience, and they know collectively it's real. And that is incredibly powerful.
Wow.
The post-seance experience is almost as much fun and enlightening as the physical mediumship seance itself.
Oh, that's a great
Because
point.
afterwards you get to talk to all the people that have been in there. David Thompson sits in Sarasota. There must be 30, 35 people in the room.
Right.
So afterwards you go to the auditorium and you get to mix with everybody and say, well, what did you see and what did you hear and what did you get from this? And I'll give you a really quick example of it is, Kevin, I think you and I sat in this one, a big black woman, and I say this with no prejudice because she sounded like an old mammy.
Yes.
Her name was May, and she came through, and she had a fluorescent tablet, and you could hear her carrying what sounded like a baby, a child. And she may approach this particular individual, the sitter, who happened to be sitting next to Donna Moncrief. Grant, who related some of this, but she walked over there with this spirit child, and then this huge booming voice said to this lady, she says, I've brought your child to you to see, and put the spirit child's feet over the fluorescent tablet where you could actually see the outline of the feet.
Yeah.
And after the seance was over, I went to look for Donna and her friend, this lady, And I went to approach them, and Donna grabbed me, knowing me. She says, "Come this way. I need to tell you something." And I said, "Well, what's the problem? I just want to go over and get her experience on this." She said, "She's never told anybody about this child. This child was stillborn. She's never mentioned it to anyone, and she's really pretty angry about it because she wanted it to be her own,
I love it.
secret." So you get to have those kinds of interactions that are as valuable as the interactions that go on in the physical seance. But there's a second part of this, Grant, and I think this will lead back to your consciousness concerns and focus. Spirit is of a particular set range of vibration. They exist in a realm that has a lower vibration that's not very far off from ours, and an upper vibration. And in that realm, that vibrational realm, is what they know about. But it's like living in a big city. If you live in New York City and you want to really know about New York City, living in it's fine, but you get in a helicopter and fly around and look down, you can learn a heck of a lot more about what's going on than you can stuck in between the skyscrapers.
Yeah.
Well, spirit has the same problem.
Yeah.
They're stuck in a realm of energy. They're stuck in there. They know pretty much about what's going on, but they can't get the bigger view sometimes. So I've come up with a little phrase that says, if you want to know about ET, ask ET. If you want to know about spirit, ask ET. Because the up the ladder education from learning about what is going on in the spirit realm, how the spirit realm was created, what kind of beings are there, who can pass in and out of the spirit realm. That comes from the extraterrestrial community. It comes from the Bashars, and it comes from the William Truenets and the physical medium Paul Hamden. It comes from those areas. So I found that I spent a great deal of time learning about the spirit world. A lot of it thankful to Kevin and to the seance experiences that I've had. But at some point, I realized that spirit could only tell so much about spirit. And there had to be some place else to go to get additional information. And that had to be outside the spirit world. Yeah. So for those people that are looking in and are listening to this, there is a huge amount of evidentiality about life after death, consciousness, continuity, that comes from the spirit world. But once you've got that down and you're comfortable with your immortality, you're comfortable with your eternal beingness, once you understand the consciousness aspects and how they interplay, look to the extraterrestrial community, who is now becoming more and more and more communicative, and look there for answers that not only affect what is the spirit realm really actually all about from an energetic standpoint, but you can get a lot of life lessons from that community as well.
Beautiful. Can I ask a technical question? I sort of made a joke with Sinead early on. She has profound hearing loss, and I'm a big Michael Newton fan. Journey of Souls, Destiny of Souls, Life Between Life, all this kind of stuff. And in when he's describing people going back into the spirit world, he talks about the fact that it's very, very quiet, almost like Sinead's world when she turns off her hearing aids. And so my question to you is, when a being, is there actually, it's all telepathic, which is same as the ET world, where people talk about as telepathic. So can you talk a little bit about this, how the spirit, when it comes in, it has to, like with whether it's Leslie Flint or whether it's David Thompson, where you have to form a sort of a voice box where they really can't talk, but they form a voice box,
right?
Use that to speak through. That there really is no sound in that world. Am I right with that?
There is not sound as we understand it, according to spirit. That the reason why one of the reasons why our souls come into physical expression is to experience the five senses the way that we do: the touch, the taste, the sight, smell, and hearing. Because in the spirit world, they don't have those five senses the way we experience them in a very gross and physical way. When they experience their sensory experiences is a type of light vibration that they literally blend and merge with, and they have experiences of consciousness. So it's a very, it's literally like an explosion of all of our senses at once in a moment of bliss, if you will. It's probably the closest way I can, the best way I can describe it. And they also, they talk about coming here to experience senses, physical touch, mating, having a broken heart, experiencing murder, experiencing death and life and all that. So we're coming to experience the senses. In these experiences in seance rooms, there are different ways of communication. The spirit world will either they will create a resonant harmonic of some sort, and I hope I'm using the right terminology. They will vibrate the ethers and the air to create the sound or the music they need to come into the experience. Or they will, depending on which spirits are around helping the medium, if these spirits have the understanding of alchemy, chemistry, technology, then they will begin to build the etheric and physical components of ectoplasm into a voice box. And the voice box can either be, say, for instance, on my shoulder. It will come out somewhere out of one of my orifices, my chest, my privates, mostly out of the mouth. It'll somehow be over here. It could be up. It could actually crawl or extend up onto the wall. It could be up near the ceiling. It could, and so basically the sound will come from this resonant harmonics, if you will, through this this spirit-created device, the voice box, and voice, sound, and music will come through. They can also create a type of voice box where they will mimic, they will generate ectoplasm in the back of the throat, and it's almost like a plug. It will go over the voice box in the back of the throat. Objects cannot go down, up or down. So you can actually hold water in the mouth, in the back of the throat, and the sound will still be produced even when the mouth is shut and full of liquid. The sound is still produced out through, I don't know how specifically, but they're still able to produce through this ectoplasmic structure in the back of the throat. Some mediums, when they go into trance, they use their physical throat to produce sound like I'm speaking. Others will be more physical mediumship oriented, where there will be ectoplasmic structures that will produce the words. The mouth may or may not move in the darkness, but the words will come out through that resonance. And let's see, Spirit has also talked about, and one of the interesting phenomena is, and when you start going to seances, you'll start hearing spirits say, "Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Am I loud enough? Do you understand what I'm saying? Is it clear?" Well, why do they always say that? So we've questioned them. And what they say is they go into a type of a box in the spirit world. It's a structure. And in that structure is a form of ectoplasm that connects their world to the medium. It's almost like an ectoplasmic bridge that is extracted from the medium, pulled into that part of the spirit world, into the box. The beings, your loved ones typically, will walk into this box and shut the door, and they will literally immerse their face or their head or their upper body into the substance. The substance is neurologically or thought reactive. They will then begin the process. They say it feels like they're burying themselves in either in mud or a very like into deep water, because they feel the pressure of the substance around them. It'll wrap around their face and their head and their ears, and they begin to think what they want to say, and that's transmitted through the structures of the ectoplasm, which is also connected to the neurological system of the medium, right? And so this thought then enters the neurological system of the medium and begins to take on form. Comes through the mouth, comes through the voice box structure, or I guess possibly, I don't have the specifics on how they are able to create non-ectoplasmic structures that just create sound out of air, but they can do it. I don't fully understand that aspect yet, but I will say that they basically, when they send the thought through of, can you hear me? It's your mother, it's your child, it's your grandfather. Is it clear? They're literally thinking into the substance, and it's having a physical manifestation in our dimension. And our response is not necessarily heard per se, but it's more of an understanding of, it's a frequency of light that goes back through the ectoplasmic structure back into the spirit world, and it's received like a thought. So it's almost like thought transference when we respond verbally, or when we're laughing, when we're beaming and joyful and loving, we're sending these vibrations back through this bridge that connects the two worlds. And that's what they say it's like for them. Really quite interesting.
That's well explained, by the way, Kevin. And you'll notice that the spirits that come through will have different voice levels. The ones that are not well practiced at the art of communicating through this, they'll speak very slow or low, and you can almost barely hear them. I've sat at the back of a seance room and not heard spirit that Kevin can hear sitting right next to the medium in the cabinet. A good example of this is I was attending a seance with my wife, and she got called to sit in a chair in front of the cabinet, and which is not unusual, because spirit likes to cause the medium to reach out through the cabinet and to touch you on the back and rub your head and thump your back of your shoulders so that others can hear that they're physical. And during this process, she sits down in the chair. Kevin puts on the CD player, and it goes to the John Lennon song Imagine. Well, my wife was a huge, and still is a huge, John Lennon fan. Grew up wearing John Lennon Beatle caps, the whole works. The synchronicity was obvious. But he came through very lightly as he began to sing in his perfect voice. Very lightly, he would sing the song Imagine while he was holding on to her. And it was just an astounding thing, but it highlighted the fact that they have to practice this art.
Yes.
So spirits that have been transitioned for a while, or spirits that have been in more and more seances, will come through very loudly, very easily, and with no trouble at all, because they've practiced at their art. And those that cannot, for instance, like Winston Churchill. Churchill comes through in David Thompson's. He comes through in Warren Kaler's mediumship. I don't know if he's come through with Kai recently or not, but he's a common celebrity spirit who comes through. And he will literally get within feet of your face and begin to ask you questions, or for once asked us to, he said, I want to transcribe a book. Will you and Kevin and another individual, will you transcribe my book? I want to call it A Prime Minister's View from the Other Side. And we laugh about this. Kevin and I laugh about this thing, because when I started to think about it, the next seance, I asked him, I said, Winston, I got a question. How long is this book going to be? And he says, 671 pages. And I'm doing the math in my head. I'm going, that's 40 seances. 2 hours each seance. I said, this book isn't going to get written. Well, the only reason I think that he made this mistake is because he's in a timeless environment. But he's been to so many seances, has come so many times, he's very clear about what he wants to say and very easily understood. And there's several of them like that. You'll find that the newer spirits coming through can be very diminished, very quiet, and you have to listen very hard to hear much of anything of their message.
Yeah, Spirit will say that, briefly I'll say this, that the spirit guides, the teachers, the masters, these beings that have worked with the mediums and seances for a period of time, they're more humanized, and they've chosen the roles to remain human spirit guides to categorize them, because they're willing to allow their soul not to evolve to higher levels, to do other work that could evolve them, and so they could go to higher dimensions. They've chosen to stay in the fourth or the fifth dimension, so that they are close to the third dimension of human expression, to work with the human race, to help the human race understand there's more to life than what we know. And so our loved one, so those spirit guides, because they're humanized and trained in how to make communication, they are brilliant at coming through and speaking in their own voice, their own intonations, inflections. But your loved ones, your children who have died and that you've only really known maybe for one life, and they're just brand new over there, they don't have that experience. They don't know how to work with the technology of the spirit world, the chemicals, the etheric machinery and connections. So I know when it's a loved one coming through, because they always sound broken and choppy and limited, and they're whispery, and they don't have control of the device that they're using on the other side. It's really interesting.
Oh, interesting. That's really, really interesting. That's the first time I've heard of that, but that also makes so much sense, the way you just explained that. Yeah.
Well, so now there was a seance that Kevin may remember, because a lot of times people think, well, the only way the spirit world will come and talk to me where I can really hear it with my ears or telepathically is in the seance. And it just isn't true. Just like Kevin's experience. I walked outside. Warren Kaler does a 30-minute pre-seance, tell you what not to do, what's going to happen kind of thing. All the seance mediums do this.
Right.
And then you take a break and you do whatever you want to do. I was going back to my car because I wanted to get on another pair of pants or something, because Kevin keeps the seance room at about 43 degrees.
60 to 65.
Yeah. I mean, so I'm thin-skinned and stuff. I'm a Florida guy, so it gets below 60, it's like, okay, that's it. I'm going to Cuba now. But so I go out to the car, and I'm in the car, and I'm putting on my second pair of breeches or whatever it is. And I hear this from Winston Churchill. He says, "You got to get back." And I went, oh, okay. And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to go on back into the seance room, and I'm thinking, I've never had any spirit talk to me I know of, that clearly, telepathically clearly. It sounded like a real voice, to be honest with you. So as I'm walking back, I'm thinking, I'm going to go to the bathroom, a boy thing. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't really want to go to the bathroom. Why am I going to the bathroom? So I go to the bathroom, and Warren Kaler, the medium, the physical medium, is in the bathroom with me. And we start kidding each other about extraterrestrials. It's just something we joke back and forth. So we kidding back and forth and whatnot, So we do our thing, we get through, we go back into the seance room. Warren goes into the cabinet door is shut, he gets bound to the chairs, Kevin does his thing, we're starting the seance, right? First thing, the person that comes through is Winston Churchill. And he comes over and he says to me, I heard you and young Warren having that conversation about extraterrestrials. And you and I are going to have a real long conversation one day about those. And I'm thinking, there's no privacy in the bathroom. No, these spirits are around us right now. They're listening to this right now.
They sure
They're
are.
as much a part of our world, just because we can't see them, we can't communicate as directly as we might. They're as much a part of our world as the four of us are.
I've seen a lot of evidence of that. Yeah, they do listen to us. They're always around us. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? In the Leslie Flint communications, there's some discussion about the spirit world, people trying to figure out new ways, as if they're working on this technology, trying to make it better. Like they're not like all knowing. They're basically trying to figure it out as well, and trying to figure new ways to make communication. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. They have higher perspectives. I even present the fact that spirit is not fallible, if that's the right way to say it. They make mistakes, and I show it in my research on precipitation mediumship. Precipitating names incorrectly. It's curious. I've even seen precipitated images that had copyright and trademark marks in them, but that does not prove they were fraudulently produced. It proves spirit doesn't care about what is in the image, but they needed that image to reflect for the person to receive it. And that was really interesting. But spirit is, they, like Walter said earlier, Spirit has a higher perspective, as though they're on the top of a skyscraper and we're down on street level. We can just see to the corner and around the corner, but we can't see the greater perspective. And Spirit does make mistake. They're not infallible. I've heard them say that they do have greater knowledge, but they can't predict everything with 100% accuracy. They don't have all the answers, but they have a lot of answers. And it's just really fascinating. But with Leslie Flint, Spirit talked about building technology and working in the spirit world to create communicative devices that could work with us here in the third dimension. And we've, over the years, we've seen Thomas Edison was communicated with by Spirit, and he was trying to build devices. The famous skull experiments of the 1990s, they created communication devices. Warren Kaler, good friend, he has created a germanium chip-based device based on the skull experiment communications, and it began to work. Warren's did. And a lot of groups have done things like that. And even the famous Brazilian researcher, and I know she's a medium. She doesn't say she's a medium, but she's a freaking amazing medium. Sonia Rinaldi with the iPatty Institute, which is basically, she's an instrumental transcommunication researcher getting profound evidence of life after death. Profound. I don't use that word lightly. I mean, she is getting your loved ones' pictures and their voices to come through in her technology. Truly amazing stuff. But even with her, Nikola Tesla and a few others that we know their names, that are working with her, talk about they utilize spirit technology and machinery, much like computers, but they're thousands of years advanced to our understanding. And they literally immerse their thought into the machines, and the machines are producing robotic signals that she is able to pick up that sounds like it's a computer program. It's really fascinating. And so it just goes to show me that different spirits are working in different capacities to try and make communication possible in their ways. It could be alchemical properties. It could be chemistry properties in a very cosmic way. It could be earth properties. It could be who knows what all the properties are. They say there are some we can't even, human race doesn't even understand, can't comprehend. But there are other forces in nature that we don't have the technology developed. Our science is too young for these eternal forces to even register. We can't comprehend it. We can't measure it. And we may never. But there's a lot of different types of machines, spiritual machines being built to make communication with us humans by the so-called spirit world. And I would assume, based on the little bit of understanding of spiritual machinery and alchemical processes and all of this, the same types of things must be being used by the dimensional beings and the extraterrestrials in different ways, because they sure sound a heck of a lot familiar. There's so many similarities in the phenomena, in the facts, and the ways things are presented. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
So I think that there's what's happening. If you look back over the history of physical mediumship in the United States, was where it started, in the middle of the 1800s or so. There were much more profound, from a phenomena standpoint, physical mediums than we have today. We had physical mediums that were being levitated out of second room floors up to the third room floors and back in a window. We had mediums getting dematerialized and rematerialized outside in the bushes during non-seance activities.
Yep.
And then we had this kind of downturn. It started kind of when Wesley Flint died in the early 90s. And he was the greatest physical medium that I've ever researched, and it's certainly the most tested. But we kind of had a lull. And then all of a sudden, Warren Kaler and Kai Mugi and David Thompson and Scott Milligan, other mediums started coming along. And to me, it's like they're plugging a gap. And that gap is, okay, we're going to go back to the old ways. We're going to give you spirit communication again, but the technology, such as the spirit phone that you're speaking about, Grant, which is a direct connection to the spirit community. All these things are going, I think one day we're going to see mediumship as we know it disappear, because it will no longer be necessary to have a human factor involved. We'll be able to make that direct connection through technology. And at some point, we may not even need any technology at all. And when people ask me, how quickly do you think that's going to happen? I think it's going to happen very, very quickly. We're on a highly accelerated course with the communication with extraterrestrials, communication with spirit. And there would be, I'd hate to see this, but there may be a day when physical mediumship is really no longer needed. That we don't need to sit in the dark. We don't need a specialized human being. We don't need that type of environment to connect. That we literally will be able to go into a booth, sit down at a contraption that looks like a phone, pick it up. Somebody else on the other end will pick it up, and we'll have a conversation.
Wow, beautiful, wonderful. I think we'll stop and Kevin, can you tell us basically what your people that want to contact you? Because I'm going to stay in great contact with you and Walter, because you have so much of the stuff that I'm working on, and I know you have courses, you have all sorts of stuff going on. So maybe give us what you have, and we'll link this in the description so that people can follow up on what you're doing.
Sure. So definitely, thank you for mentioning that. I forget the promotional part, but the people can find me at revkevinlee.com, R-E-V, kevinlee.com. And that's basically how they can contact me through the internet, or they can even find me through Facebook if they search for Kevin Lee, spiritual medium and teacher. And my ministry is the Metaphysical Chapel of South Florida, and that's metaphysicalchapel.com. And I travel to Lilydale. I travel to Camp Chesterfield. These are two very famous, large spiritualist communities. And I teach and lecture there. I'll be teaching in Camp Chesterfield 3 times this summer into the fall, presenting courses and a little bit of my research into precipitation mediumship. And then just from time to time, I love to present and work with my students and people through the internet, because I'm just so mesmerized with precipitation. To me, it changed my life. It's so beautiful, and I've created a couple of meditation albums just to help people, really from a very unique point of perspective. How do you meditate? Why are you even meditating? Why is it so important? I didn't just create tracks for you to plug in and listen to. There's actually philosophical principles to the meditations that you will receive before they begin. And then I take you on a journey which is a purposeful journey, and to maybe unfold and activate some things within yourself, or making contact with spirit. And then I created specifically for my research an album called Precipitation Mediumship, Empowering Spirit's Artistry. And that is to basically, people want to take me home after the lectures, and they want to continue developing precipitation mediumship. So I created this little teaching album that has several tracks to teach you how to expand your light, how to work etherically with the alphabet to build. And you touched on it briefly, Grant, which was interesting. The spirit world literally will reach in and access my memories and my thoughts, and they describe it as though they reach in and they touch the very neuron where the memory is stored, and they activate that thought. And that's how I'm able to bring through evidence for someone in an audience.
Oh.
But in the same way, the same principle, why not build the library of, remember when we were kids, we have no young millennials on the show right now. So we were made to do cursive exercises, and we had to print in capitals and little letters. So I thought, wouldn't it be brilliant to do an etheric exercise where I direct the listener to create etheric alphabet in their mind, every letter, and we go through it together. And so there's one of those exercises, and basically just principles of bringing light and blessed energy into the sacred container that produces the phenomena of precipitation on the little cards in the canvas, whatever we use. So that was one of my latest creations. I'm working on a little book, a companion guide, to literally teach people in a quick way how to develop that gift of spirit. And also, in addition, I'm working with a book writing coach to produce my first big book that will go off to publishers. So we're actually courting publishers as I speak. We'll see how that all goes forward. But that's the best way to find me, through one of those avenues, the Metaphysical Chapel, or through my website, revkevinlee.com. Okay, and I thank you guys for this opportunity to share with you today.
I appreciate it, and hopefully we can do you when you're doing your books. But I'll be in contact with you a lot because
absolutely.
I mean, I'm sort of as I said, you're the guy I've been waiting for. I've been looking for this for a while. And thank you to Walter. Have you got any final comments? You're the one that sort of tracked me down. And I remember you said you had sent me an email or whatever. I hadn't paid any attention, and you basically reminded me, like, are you going to do something about this? Or and it was that was sort of woke me up. And so it was Walter who put me on to you, and it was sort of like I've been bouncing around, running into walls, not knowing where to go.
Good.
I can't believe there's somebody who has basically all the answers I've been looking for. So,
no, good.
Well, it was funny about that, Grant, because that was a pretty strong email I sent you, because it was like the third one. And I'm thinking, this guy's got to wake up over here. You know, he's Mr. Consciousness and he's unconscious.
Yeah.
And so I sent the last one, I think, had a little edge to it, if you might say. But,
it worked. It worked. It worked.
But if people would like to contact me, I write articles. I call them thought pieces. There are things that come to me while I'm sleeping. I wake up in the morning and I just go write them. Clean them up and then send them out. Walter at walterrucker.com. Send me an email. I'll be happy to put you on my list. Answer any questions that you might have. And like Kevin here, we're very appreciative for this forum.
Absolutely. And Sinead and Grant, I just want to say, Walter had mentioned where he has written, you know, so many people don't know what precipitation is. If they can, if they want to go to read some of the articles that I've produced on theothersidepress.com, they'll get a lot of information in a short period of time on what is precipitation mediumship, because it's so unusual. But that's a great website for a lot of things mediumship, written by very scholarly people, theothersidepress.com. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. That's a great reference to have. Yeah. And this has been such a great conversation. So much fun and lots of passion and interest, and it's great energy.
Thank you both so much.
Yeah, wonderful.
Well, if it's not fun, don't do it.
Right.
It's simple as that.
Well, I thank everybody for coming on. And just to correct, before I mentioned Sinead had hearing aids, she's got cochlear implants. I knew that. I just couldn't think of the word.
Cool.
But I appreciate her coming on and helping me. And I know that Walter and I may do a separate interview on some other stuff. But you two guys are extremely knowledgeable, and I would encourage everybody to look up your stuff, because as I said, this is, I think, where it's at. I mean, if you want to understand, as the one person said, if you want to understand what's going on, you understand what happens at death, and you sort of unravel what reality is all about. We're sort of, you know, looking at the wrong end of the telescope, or however we want to phrase it. But I really appreciate your time and your wisdom. I've learned a lot, and I intend to learn some more. I'll answer the emails from now on.
I have a question for you, Grant.
Yeah.
How many 1-hour interviews go 2.5 hours?
Oh, it has been 2.5. Wow.
That's what I said. We were going to do a 55-minute because we were going to put it on to like a radio. I used to do a radio show. So I said, if it's 55 minutes, we can put on the radio show. And then Sinead was sort of saying, well, you're getting close. And I said, just let it roll. This would be Desta's, you know, it's like, this is Desta's problem. She's going to have to, she's going to edit my stuff. And I figured, like, there's no way you can shut this down. I mean, I may only get you guys one time on a podcast like this. It's not like we got to try to reschedule for another hour. Let's try to get all this, because you guys have so much information, and
thank you.
I'm forever grateful. I mean, I do the gratitude meditation almost every day if I can, and I'll be very grateful tonight for what you've given to us.
Thank you very much.
That's what prayer is, attitude with gratitude.
Beautiful. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.